All right, hi everybody. Thank everybody for taking the time to hop on this webinar with us. The topic of the webinar this week is going to be the simple mistakes that cost organizers ticket sales. I'm Ben Schwartz, Grand Poobah of Sales at Ticketbud. I'm also here with Jack Meredith. He heads up marketing at Ticketbud. So we're going to go ahead and get the webinar started. There's going to be a recorded version of this after if you need to go over anything or want to review anything. So no worries if you miss anything, you can always check it out at a later time. So for the webinar, what we're really going to focus on, rather than some major things to expect or any big things related to an event, we're going to focus on the small errors, mistakes, and pitfalls that we see lots of organizers deal with on a daily basis with their event. So as we move on to the next slide, the main thing that I want, and I think Jack and everybody involved in this webinar want you to take away from it is really three main things. First is that when this webinar is over, you should have a better idea of how to build an event page that generates more ticket revenue. And so by that, first, we're making the assumption that you're selling tickets online. I assume that's a safe assumption. But the second thing is that your event page is going to be where people come to buy tickets. So that's what they're there for. Your event page shouldn't just be a way for them to go and buy tickets. It should, when they get to that page, push them to buy more tickets. It should give them a reason to buy more tickets. There should be some sort of call to action, something that makes them want to not just look at it and maybe buy tickets, but to actually actively want to be a part of the event. So we'll show you how to do that. You should also be able to know how to make your event easy to find, and then once it's found, make it easy to share. We'll go over exactly how that works. And one thing that you'll see is that sort of that process is almost a snowball effect. The easier your page is to find and the more it's shared, it's going to become easier and easier. So that first part is always the hardest, and we'll show you exactly how to do that. And then lastly, just to make things just from a psychological perspective, 3 is an easy number to fixate on. Rather than remembering everything associated with this webinar, what is a good idea to do is just pick the 3 that make sense to you, the ones that maybe your 3 favorites, or the ones that you've made in the past, and then focus on those. And then, of course, we have the webinar recorded, so you can come back at any later time and pick out the extra ones. So those are the things that you should, by the end of this webinar and going into your event, be able to know and be prepared for. So to start, the myth about mistakes. So I have a nice quote from our friend Oscar Wilde right there. Experience is simply the name we give our mistakes. And so the reason I included this, and the reason it's our sort of starting slide, is just to show and point out that mistakes are going to happen. I mean, even if you follow everything that we tell you in this webinar, there's still going to be mishaps and screw ups that happen. It's natural. And to mention that quote, if you're not making mistakes, you're probably not pushing your boundaries. You're probably not trying something new. So mistakes are not a bad thing. That means you're doing something at least. And what this webinar is going to focus on is the small and the simple mistakes. Those are the things you can avoid. The bigger mistakes, the bigger things like the caterer doesn't show up or the band is just terrible, whatever the case may be. Those are big things, and you can only prepare for those. The small things are what you can avoid, and so that's what we're going to focus on, things that you can just cut out entirely and not have to worry about. So moving on to our very first one, making your event easy to find and easy to share. And so for Jack, one of the big things that you focus on, obviously, in the marketing department is getting the word out. I mean, that's a big part of marketing and wherever you are. So there's a few key mistakes, and I'll let you go ahead and take it from here. Starting first and foremost with, I think, one of the most important things, which is the URL associated with an event.
Yeah, so this is probably one of the, common mistakes that we see our organizers make, and it's something that's easily overlooked. So when you create your event page, a lot of the organizers get really excited and just want to start selling tickets. And they don't think about how their attendees are going to get to the event page. And an easy way to really make it, very straightforward for the attendees to get to the event page is to think about the length of the URL. You want to make it short and simple so that an attendee can easily share it with their friends, or they can even easily type it into their web browser if they don't, copy and paste it offhand. A big mistake that we see is, looking at this image right here, a lot of organizers will have these extremely lengthy URLs that not only make it hard for attendees to find and go to, but in terms of, offline advertising, like, an event poster that you put up around town, for instance, if you have a nasty URL like that, it's going to be really hard for people to remember. So you want it to be short and simple so people can get there as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and a good rule of thumb is really if it takes more than 5 seconds for you to say your URL, or you can't even remember your URL without having to look it up, it's probably too long or too complicated. One thing that I always tell organizers that I work with and help with their event, just say your URL out loud. If it sounds weird to you and it sounds like it's not something that you could easily just spit off when somebody asks you what it is, make it easier, because the whole point of making it easy to find is sort of having a simple address. So that's going to be one really crucial thing. So one of the other things that I know Jack has had experience with organizers is a lot of times organizers they just don't really take the time to think about where their attendees are online, and they sort of assume that Facebook is what I use, that must be what my attendees use. And for example, I used the example of a food event. Food's very visual. Most of food attendees are going to be on something like Instagram. So what sort of talk a little bit more about that, sort of knowing and understanding you sort of your attendee profile, if you will.
Yeah. So when we work with a lot of our clients, before we even think about launching ticket sales and an accompanying marketing strategy, we really want to dig down into the attendee customer profile. And so what I mean by that is really understanding the demographics of your target attendees. Who are you expecting to attend? And what that does, it allows you to really pick apart niche factors within your attendees, so you can understand what marketing channels they're going to be utilizing. So kind of what Ben said about not making assumptions regarding where your attendees are hanging out on the internet is going to save you a lot of advertising dollars at the start, so you guys aren't spending money on marketing channels that no one in your target audience is going to be under. Yeah. We'll add this in the notes in the email after, but there's a great book by Gary Vaynerchuk called I think it's called Jab Jab Right Hook. It's all about social media and how to really understand each platform and how to make advertisements native to that platform. It's more a general marketing book, not event specific, but we know since a lot of events use social advertising and social marketing as part of their marketing strategy, it's a super relevant book to read, and you can learn a lot from it.
Yeah, and I follow, some of you may follow Gary V on Twitter. I do. And he's got a lot of great stuff that just helps you sort of understand what your attendees are doing. And one thing to mention on that is that, something that Jack and I do, and I encourage organizers to do, is make an attendee profile of your ideal attendee. And that's everything down to, are they male or female? Do they have a family? I mean, sometimes it's helpful even to get down to just picturing this person in your head and getting a mental image of a specific person. The idea behind that is that when you have a person in your mind that you can say, okay, they do this and they do this, it makes it very easy for you to base your actions off of somebody, because you know what their tendencies might be, as opposed to when you think about your attendees, you're just thinking of this amorphous blob that could be anybody, this faceless profile picture that you have no insight into. So it can be very good mentally to picture an attendee, your ideal attendee, what they look like, what they do, what they like to do, and then base your actions off of that. It's from a psychological standpoint, it's really helpful for us. And then the last thing, as far as making your event easy to find and share, is just asking. You'll sort of, I mentioned it earlier, but we see that the finding and sharing process is like a snowball. The easier it is to find, the easier it is to share. The more it's shared, the more people are going to be finding it. And then from there, they're going to share it, and it just gets easier and easier and easier. So that initial hump is always going to be the hardest. And so one way to overcome that hump is to just straight out ask people to share. And it's usually not a big deal. If they don't want to share it, they won't. If they do, of course they will. I mean, Jack, we've got a few features on Ticketbud, just referring back to our own software. I mean, can you just share a little bit about how to make it easy and how to ask and make it easy to share?
Yeah, so luckily on our back end, once an attendee completes a purchase, not only will they get directions to how to access tickets, but they'll also have very easy clickable social share buttons on the confirmation page. So they can share to any of their social networks pretty, automatically in an automated process. Beyond that, another trick that we've seen some of our clients use is that they'll offer promo code, like dollar off amounts on tickets if you do share. So it gives attendees a reason to share it with their friends. Typically, attendees are going to share the event that they're attending anyways, but it's another experiment that you can try to really initiate that step in the sharing process. But yeah, like Ben was saying, in regards to sharing, social proof is such a big factor when it comes to events. People don't want to go to an event alone. They want their friends to go as well. So making that as easy as possible is very key to kind of get this snowball effect going.
Yeah, I mean, it's as we move to the next slide. I mean, it's common to want to be a part of something. So if it looks like your friends are going, you're going to want to go. So make sure that those links are there post purchase. Make sure it's easy to share. So the next sort of thing we're going to focus on is the event page. That to me is, in my opinion, it's probably one of the most important things you'll do as an organizer. This is the actual page where you'll be earning your revenue. I mean, this is where you'll be making the money that allows you to host future events and pay the caterer and all that good stuff. And what we're going to focus on is not just having an event page, but actually building one that actively pushes the people that come to it to buy a ticket. So it's one thing to just create the bare bones of a page and hope somebody converts. It's another thing to have, pieces in place that are designed to push you through that funnel from just visiting the site all the way to being attendees. So the first mistake, and this is a huge one, is making guests leave the event page. You've worked really hard to get people to come to this page to buy tickets. Be careful about pushing them off the page. Some of the most common ways people do this is, first, they have images or videos that are not embedded into the page. They're links that you click on and get taken to another page. You don't want to do that. Even if it's a video, the act of leaving a page psychologically, it makes it much harder to come back and actually do what you want them to do, which is buy tickets. Another really big one that we see really, really frequently is that people pick a payment processor that takes them off the page entirely. So basically, when somebody goes to buy a ticket, they hit that final step, they get pushed to another separate page where that's where they actually buy the ticket. That kind of freaks people out. They feel like they're going to an insecure page. It kind of worries them, and it can cause people to not attend your event, or at least think twice. We offer a couple solutions that allow you to keep your payment processing directly on the page. They don't have to go to any other pages. WePay and Stripe, in particular, come to mind. Of course, Ticketbud's internal processor as well. So we try to give you the convenience of keeping people on the page. But the last thing you want to do, even if it's social media, the last thing you want to do is have people leave the page. As we sort of alluded to earlier, you want people going on social media and sharing sort of once they've already bought their tickets. That's kind of the idea. So, making somebody leave a page is the last thing you want to do. It kills conversion. So that's one thing to be aware of. The other mistake is that your page is just putting people to sleep. We've sort of got these three sort of rules you can follow that'll give you sort of an advantage over other organizers in that you don't have a page that's just boring. And so the first thing, and this is something that I like to abide by, is the 3-33 rule. And basically this rule states that when somebody comes to your page, you have 3 seconds to capture their attention. If you do that successfully, they will give you 30 seconds to engage them, to show them more about your event. And if that works, you then have 3 minutes for them to complete the process of buying a ticket. This applies to all sorts of content, but the idea here, if you want to follow this rule and a way to make your page not boring, is to, within 3 seconds, what does that mean? That's the aesthetics of your page. That's how pretty is your page. In 3 seconds, does it draw the eye? Does it have dynamic color, video, things like that? Then, assuming that works, you have 30 seconds. And so that 30 seconds is your event description. So that's, what can you do why is the event worth attending? What's going to be there? What's going on? And then from there, you have 3 minutes to get them to actually buy a ticket. So that's a good way to sort of keep people on your page and keep them interested. Jack can share more about this 1-to-1 attention ratio. So I'll go ahead and open that up to you.
Yeah, it's a nice segue since they're kind of similar in terms of what they're trying to do. So the attention ratio is the 1-to-1 attention ratio in particular is the ratio of links on your event page to the number of campaign conversion goals. So for an event page in particular, your conversion goal is to get people to purchase tickets. So you want to have a 1-to-1 ratio in that regard, and that you don't want to have like a bunch of different links to different things that could distract your attendee from doing what you want them to do once they get to that page. So a common mistake that we'll see some of our organizers make is that they'll have just a bunch of different links on their event page. that could go to like, a YouTube video highlighting the event, or, the event organizer's own website. There's a bunch of different
sponsors pages,
Yeah.
something like that. I mean, anything really.
Yeah, and what this does is it's distracting people's attention. Like the 3 to 30 to 3, you want to keep that focus primarily on what the goal is, and that's for them to purchase tickets. So it's a easy one to follow, and it's also an easy one to like not really consider as you're going through the process, because you're not really stepping into the shoes of the attendee when you're building your event page. So trying to do that as much as possible is really going to help you focus on making that process as simple as possible for your attendees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I mean the idea here is simplicity, right? These rules sound kind of complicated, but when you think about it, they're really intuitive. And actually, I think of the rules that we've shown you here, I think that the last one is my favorite, and Jack can share a little more about that, because it's you don't really think about it in these terms until you really break it down. But you can go ahead and share a little bit more about this one.
Yeah, so this is regarding copy length. So this is, all the words that you're writing to convince your attendees to complete the purchase for tickets on your site. And so what we like to say is that there's a relationship between the amount of copy and the price of the tickets. So for instance, if you're organizing a fundraiser and the tickets are $10, that isn't a big purchasing decision for most people. $10, I mean, people can go to multiple events at the $10 range. So you don't have to worry about spending so much time convincing them. Your event page itself should really do the work, and it's going to be you're just going to spend probably way too much time writing the copy, making sure all your graphics are in place. Now, in contrast, if you're selling $200 tickets to a conference, for instance, that's a big purchasing decision for most people. That attendee probably has to choose from not only your conference, but a sea of other conferences going out throughout the year. So in this case, you want to make sure that you have very extensive sales copy that explains exactly what they get for the amount of money that they're spending on your event. So this isn't to say that, a fundraiser should just have a blank event page and expect to sell tickets, but you just got to really know your attendee and what their expectations are, and you want to meet those expectations through the event page and the amount of work that you put into it.
Yeah, I think Jack mentioned something that I think is pretty crucial to this particular part of the webinar, is that you need to look at things through the attendee's eyes. These are some rules that help you to do that, but ultimately, when you put a lot of effort into something, that's the thing that you want to promote. So if you worked really hard to get a certain speaker or to do this or do that, that's the one thing you want to promote. But what you need to step back and look at is, what does this mean to my attendees? How long do I have their attention for? What is it that they're really interested in? Why should they care? What are my price points? What does that mean for my copy? And so that's a big thing you need to take into consideration. So it's a nice little segue when you talk about price points, because when people come to your page, ultimately one of the biggest deciding factors on whether they go or not is going to be the cost of a ticket. And so this is a really important slide, because we see this happen pretty regularly, and a lot of organizers don't even realize they're doing it. And that's that they don't have a price point that matches their demand. I mean, one of the biggest things we see is that an organizer creates an event and just inexplicably disregards their attendees' price sensitivity. They're charging $70 for a very small event. So one thing you need to do is if you've had previous events, you probably know better, what price points there are. But the question really becomes, well, if I don't know what my attendees' price sensitivity is, what's a good way to find out? And perfect for the webinar, Jack actually did something like this over New Year's. And so basically, this is the second mistake, which is that organizers misjudge their price point. And that could be either end of the spectrum. That could be they charge too much when there's not a lot of demand, or when there's a ton of demand, they don't charge enough and they lose out on sales. And so Jack's got a strategy, and it's got a nice little story, actually. So you were doing something New Year's Eve, correct?
Yeah, so this was recently. We actually my friends and I organized a pretty large boat party here in Austin. And this was our first year doing it. We didn't really know what demand was going to be, aside from our immediate friends that we knew were going to attend. So the mistake that we made was that we, in all of our marketing, we made very clear what the price jumps were going to be throughout the ticket sales process. So we had early bird pricing, and then we had our normal price points, and then finally I think we had a high price point for those that are just coming in last second.
Mm-hmm.
And so the mistake was that because we made it clear what these price jumps were going to be, we misjudged the demand for the event at the end when we were closing in on the event date. So what happened was we noticed that all these attendees wanted to purchase tickets at pretty much price points almost double than what we were charging. And so we missed out on all this potential revenue because we already had pretty much said what our price points would be.
You made it a little predictable for them to see.
Yeah. So when we kind of played it through our heads post-event, like, okay, how do we fix this situation if we throw another New Year's event? What we came up with was the batch ticket strategy, and we'll link to a blog post that explains this in depth. But what it pretty much is to manage your ticket sales demand on the fly. What you want to do is actually not tell your prospective attendees what the price jumps are going to be. Even in most senses, you won't even know what they are yet. What the batch ticket strategy allows you to do is to test price sensitivity on the fly. So what we'll do for next year is we'll have a bunch of different ticket types priced differently throughout the event. And then slowly over time, while we're selling tickets, we'll incrementally raise our prices. And that way we'll get to see every time we raise our prices what the sensitivity is for our attendees. So then, in the case that we raise them up to $90 at one point and we see demand kind of go down, we'll know that this is probably the sweet spot here where we should sit at and not raise them anymore. So that's going to really maximize our revenue, and it's an easy one to implement, especially for brand new events that are unsure of what that type of sensitivity is going to be for attendees.
Yeah, and that's the perfect thing to mention now that Jack tells that story is that, we're giving you guys the webinar, but right there is the story of a mistake that we made. And so that's going to happen, especially if it's your first event. It's really hard to gauge your price. And so what you've spent on expenses, and so you can base your ticket price off of that, or maybe similar events and can base your costs off of that. The idea here is that I think the thing that Jack learned is you never want to assume that what people are going to want. You never want to assume what prices are going to be, because your demand, if it's sky high, you should be leveraging that. And so don't, in terms of misjudging, you want to make sure that you're keeping track of your ticket sales, that you're keeping track of traffic. And so, again, to refer back to the Ticketbud platform, you can track traffic through our system. You can also see sales as they're coming in and see how you're doing, a graph trending upward as you're making more sales. So the idea is that, as your event gets more and more demand, you should be accommodating that. So that's just, it's something to take into consideration. I know Jack's strategy is probably going to pay off more for him this year because he'll be able to leverage the demand. And of course, people, I'm sure, had a good time, so they're going to be ready to come back. But the idea here is be aware of your demand and then be flexible. Have pricing in mind and always be keeping an eye on it. And so we'll move on to one of our final tips. And so the idea here, it's training your attendees to be good attendees. I know that sounds kind of weird, but the idea here is that people are coming to your event, they're viewing you, and they're looking to you as the leader. And so what you want to be able to do is be able to instruct them on some of what you want them to do, not just for their own good, but for your own good. Because if they know what to expect and they know what to do when they get to the event, it's going to make your life a hell of a lot easier. So the first mistake in terms of training, quote unquote, attendees, is that the ticket email that Ticketbud sends, the email that has the ticket attached, is the only communication you make before the event. And so I know I can, as I segue this off to Jack, I know one of the biggest things, something that we see from a support standpoint is that we get questions all the time from attendees like, what do you want? What should I expect when I get to the event? Should I have my ticket printed out? Is there a refund policy? Who should I contact if I have a question? Things like this is stuff that you can stamp out early. So Jack, what are some of the ways? What should people be doing after the ticket? Somebody buys a ticket. What kind of communication should be going on?
Totally, yeah. So to be able to scale your support directly to your attendees, two easy things to do is first, email your attendees with any important updates. This is really easy to do. If you're using the Ticketbud platform, you write the note, you click a button, and an email goes out to your attendees. So specifically, situations that might come up where this is totally warranted is if your event date changes or you have to reschedule. That's super important for your attendees to know about. Additionally, if you have any weather situation come up, that's another big one. So major happenings that are going on before your event, you should totally let your attendees know via email. It's really easy to do through Ticketbud. Additionally, another spot to where you can train your attendees is through the ticket confirmation emails that you're receiving. So through Ticketbud, you can actually customize the copy on those emails. So let's say you guys have some very specific driving directions to get to your event, or something that's just particular to your event that your attendees should know about beforehand. This is a great spot to add that in there for them to see, because they're going to receive those emails. They're going to open them because their ticket's attached. So they're going to be very focused in on what you're saying at that point. So that way you can avoid, attendees over time continuing to bombard you with emails saying, "Hey, I don't know how to get to this event," or what's the situation with this performer. Yeah, anything like that, to where you can kind of automate it and communicate them in a way that you don't have to talk to each and every one of them. It's going to help you out a lot down the line.
Right.
Now, to this, in contrast, you want to be bombarding your attendees all the time with emails and phone calls. They opted in to purchase tickets to your event, but they didn't necessarily opt in to hear you talk about the event on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. So you want to make sure that, when you're talking to them, it's super important and super relevant to the event and what their needs are, and not to abuse that relationship and that ability to email them all the time.
Sure. I think a good rule of thumb would be, in addition to any mission critical information like Jack mentioned, what we tend to see the most success with, and you can do way more than this if you want, but at a minimum, what we recommend and what we advise organizers is send an email out a week before the event and then 1 to 2 days before the event. And so this could just be an email that just says, "Hey, our event's a week away, get pumped." And then, "Hey, our event's in 2 days, get ready, please have your tickets, on your phone or printed out." So you could be telling them crucial information, or you could just be saying, "Hey, but the idea here, like what we did with this webinar and like what we'll do with any events that Ticketbud that we host, there's a lot of stuff going on in people's lives. So if the ticket email is the only communication you have, who knows if they're going to remember your event in the course of their busy schedule. Obviously, if they've bought $1,000 tickets, they're not going to forget. But maybe if it's an RSVP event or the tickets are cheap, you'd be surprised. People don't, things get lost in the mail, so to speak. So one thing you want to make sure that you do is just be friendly, be there, remind them a week out, tell them that you're excited to see them. A couple days, remind them that the event's coming. They're not going to mind, and it's a good way for you to stay top of mind for them. So the second mistake, and I think this is one that I think I've made, and I think you probably have made as well, Jack, is assuming that assuming that your attendees, know exactly what to do. You never want to assume, and at the same token, you don't want to baby them. You don't want to hold their hands, but you also shouldn't just assume that they know exactly what's going to happen at check-in and that they exactly know what the itinerary is for the event. Jack, I'll pass this one off to you again, but the big thing that comes to mind for me is the check-in process. A lot of attendees just assume that attendees are going to come and form a nice, neat line, and that never happens. So one of the things that you should never assume is that they know if they should bring their tickets or not, or if they know how to bring the tickets up on their phone. One thing that I would say is, when you send your email out, whether it's a mission critical email or one of those, week or 2 days before email, let them know when you come to the event, we'll have 2 lines. One line will be for, buying at the door. The other one will be for printed out tickets. If you have your printed out tickets, it'll be way easier to scan, or you could bring the tickets up on your phone and it's scanned. That in particular makes sense. Ticketbud, we offer a free scanner app. We have a lot of our organizers using it, but a lot of attendees come and don't realize that they're going to be using that app. So they have this great piece of technology, but the attendees didn't bring their tickets, and it's simply because they weren't told to. So that's one big thing. I know, Jack, there's some other things, other places, but I'll let you go ahead and take it as far as other things they can do.
Yeah, in particular, a good exercise to do pre-event is to really try to kind of understand what the attendee is going through by getting in their shoes. And so this means going through your event page as if you were the attendee, and going through the purchasing process as the attendee, and then kind of try to formulate questions post-purchase that your attendee would potentially have after they purchase tickets. So by doing this exercise, it really removes you from the organizer hat that you're wearing, and understanding what the attendees are expecting, and it's very hard to do just because you're an event organizer. You have thousands of different tasks and deadlines to meet, so it's really hard to kind of remove yourself from the situation and look at it from a different perspective. But if you do that, you're going to catch a lot of these simple mistakes pretty easily. It's gonna just make your event a better run event down the line, and it's gonna save you a lot of time and a lot of trouble as you start checking in attendees, having them purchase tickets. It's just gonna answer a lot of questions that you might be kind of scratching your head at if you didn't go through that type of exercise.
That's a good point. I mean, if you're gonna buy a car, you test drive it. So it's it seems kind of crazy now that we're talking about it to not test out your own event. And it seems like it's simple and it seems like something that every organizer would just do intuitively, but almost nobody does it. And it's for the reason that Jack mentioned. There's a lot of stuff going on with your event. It's very, very easy for things to just get pushed to the side. But I would say it's not something that's good to do. I'd say it's something that's crucial to do. Once your event page is up, create a free ticket or create a hidden ticket.